I never thought my life would unravel over a cup of tea. Then again, I never thought my wife of 7 years would try to poison me either. The morning started like most Sundays in our Denver home, deceptively normal, masking the tension that had been building between Claire and me for months. I was exhausted after another late-night argument about my soil analysis laboratory. A waste of your talents, she'd called it for the 1,000th time. A dead end. My independent lab wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, built from nothing over a decade of sweat and sacrifice. Claire had once admired that determination. Now she seemed to resent it. I stretched in our king-size bed, the empty space beside me still warm. The digital clock read 8:37 a.m. Voices drifted up from downstairs. Claire and her mother Margaret, no doubt strategizing over breakfast. Margaret had moved in 3 weeks ago, supposedly while between apartments, and had transformed our home into her personal campaign headquarters with one clear mission: convince Claire to leave the disappointing man she'd married. He could be making triple with his chemistry background at Kellington Biotech, I'd overheard Margaret say 2 nights ago, her voice carrying through the heating vent. Instead, he plays with dirt samples while you work yourself to exhaustion, supporting his hobby. I rolled out of bed, threw on a t-shirt and sweatpants, and headed downstairs, bracing myself for another day of passive-aggressive warfare. The hardwood stairs creaked beneath my feet, announcing my arrival. The conversation in the kitchen abruptly stopped. "Good morning, Sleeping Beauty," Margaret called out, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. She sat at our breakfast bar in designer loungewear, her silver blonde hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. At 62, she still maintained the sharp edges of the corporate attorney she'd been before retirement. Claire stood at the kitchen counter, her back to me. She flinched slightly when I entered, but didn't turn around. "Morning," she mumbled, busy with something I couldn't see. "Coffee's ready," Margaret said, gesturing to our expensive machine, a gift from her last Christmas to replace the perfectly functional one I'd owned for years. "Though Claire's making you that special tea you like." I didn't have a special tea I liked. In fact, I rarely drank tea at all. "Sounds great," I said, watching Claire's shoulders tense as she worked. Something felt off. The air in the kitchen seemed to crackle with unspoken intentions. I poured myself coffee from the carafe, buying time, observing. Claire finally turned, holding 2 steaming mugs of amber liquid. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Herbal blend," she said, placing 1 mug in front of me. "Good for digestion." The tea had an unusual odor, earthy but with chemical undertones that reminded me of certain compounds I'd worked with in the lab. Something acrid and vaguely metallic beneath the herbal scent. My stomach tightened with instinctive suspicion. I pretended to take a small sip, letting the liquid touch my closed lips. "Did you sleep well?" Claire asked, watching me too intently, her knuckles white around her own mug. "Like the dead," I lied, setting the mug down. My throat felt tight with sudden understanding. The argument last night, the hushed conversation with her mother this morning, the strange tea I'd never requested, the way Claire was staring at my mug. "Margaret, did you get any sleep with that construction noise starting so early?" I asked, deliberately shifting attention. Margaret launched into a complaint about the roadwork on our street, and I nodded sympathetically while my mind raced. When both women looked down at their phones, a synchronized moment of distraction, I smoothly switched my mug with Margaret's empty coffee cup, then poured her some of my suspicious tea as if being helpful. "You should try Claire's special blend," I said casually, sliding the mug toward her. "Since you finished your coffee." Margaret looked surprised but took the mug. "How thoughtful," she said with a hint of sarcasm. She sniffed the tea suspiciously. "Smells. Interesting." Claire's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. She opened her mouth as if to say something, then closed it, a muscle in her jaw twitching nervously. "It's an acquired taste," I said, lifting my mug, now empty, in a mock toast. I pretended to drink again, watching Claire over the rim. A drop of sweat slid down her temple despite the cool morning air. "What are your plans for today, Ethan?" Claire asked, her voice slightly higher than normal. She was trying to sound casual, but I knew all her tells after 7 years. The slight flush climbing her neck, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear repeatedly. "Just checking in at the lab for a couple hours. We've got those soil samples from the Reynolds property that need processing before tomorrow." "On Sunday," Margaret scoffed, taking a small sip of the tea. She grimaced but took another drink. Always the dedicated small businessman. The samples are time-sensitive, I explained, though I'd explained the same concept at least 20 times before. Bacterial content changes. Yes, yes, we know. Margaret waved her hand dismissively. The exciting world of dirt. Claire remained unusually quiet, fidgeting with her phone, occasionally glancing between me and her mother. Her breathing had become shallow, her chest rising and falling rapidly. I stood up. I should get dressed. Big day of dirt ahead. As I headed upstairs, I heard Margaret take another drink and comment, "This tea is terrible, Claire. It tastes like lawn clippings and chemicals." It's supposed to be healthy," Claire stammered, panic edging into her voice. In our bedroom, I quickly dressed in jeans and a button-down, my hands shaking slightly. Was I being paranoid? Could there be an innocent explanation for Claire's behavior? For the strange-smelling tea? My heart pounded against my ribs, adrenaline coursing through me, as if my body recognized the threat before my mind fully accepted it. I remembered the stack of life insurance paperwork Claire had asked me to sign last month, a policy that would pay out $750,000 in the event of my death. "It's just responsible financial planning," she'd said. At the time, it had seemed reasonable. Now I wasn't so sure. When I came back downstairs 20 minutes later, the scene in the kitchen had changed dramatically. Margaret was bent over the sink, violently retching. Claire was rubbing her mother's back, her face pale with panic. Or was it fear? "What's wrong?" I asked, feigning concern. "Mom's sick," Claire said, her voice shaking. "She just started throwing up. Maybe it was something she ate last night." Margaret turned to me, her perfectly made-up face now ashen and damp with sweat. "I feel like my insides are being shredded," she gasped, clutching her stomach. She retched again, harder this time, a thin stream of bile splashing into the sink. "We should get her to the hospital," I said firmly. "This isn't normal." "No, no," Margaret protested weakly. "It's probably just food poisoning. I'll be fine." "I insist," I said, already grabbing my car keys. "Better safe than sorry." Claire looked trapped, her eyes darting between her mother and me. I'll get her purse." When Claire dashed upstairs, Margaret grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "This is your fault," she hissed, her eyes boring into mine. "I don't know how, but this is your doing." I stared back, letting the mask of concern slip just slightly. "I guess we'll find out, won't we?" A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face as she registered my calm response. Then she doubled over again, a moan escaping her lips. 20 minutes later, I was pulling up to the emergency entrance of Denver Memorial. Margaret had vomited twice more in the car and was now experiencing severe abdominal cramps. Claire sat in the back seat with her, increasingly frantic. "I'll park and meet you inside," I told Claire, as she helped her mother out of the car. Margaret could barely stand, her legs buckling as they moved toward the sliding doors. Once they were inside, I pulled away, heart pounding. Instead of finding a parking space, I drove straight to my laboratory on the outskirts of the city. The small, unassuming building housed equipment worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, the result of years of investment and careful business development. I unlocked the door, disabled the alarm system, and went straight to my main workstation. From my jacket pocket, I removed a small container where I'd managed to discreetly pour a sample of the tea while pretending to help clean up after Margaret got sick. My hands moved automatically through the testing procedures I'd performed thousands of times, though never before for something this personal, this devastating. The betrayal burned like acid in my chest, making it hard to breathe as I waited for the analysis to complete. Within an hour, I had my answer. The tea contained a potentially lethal concentration of senna extract, a powerful natural laxative that in high doses could cause severe dehydration, electrolyte imbalance, and even heart failure in vulnerable individuals. There were also traces of ethylene glycol, anti-freeze, not enough to be immediately lethal on its own, but combined with the senna, it created a dangerous cocktail that would produce symptoms easily mistaken for severe gastroenteritis. This was no accident. No commercial tea would contain these components, especially not at these concentrations. This was deliberate. I sat back in my chair, staring at the test results, a cold emptiness spreading through my chest. My wife had tried to poison me, and now her mother was in the hospital instead. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire. Mom admitted for IV fluids. Severe dehydration. Doctor's running tests. Where are you? I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I drove back to our empty house, my mind surprisingly clear despite the chaos of emotions churning beneath the surface. There would be evidence. Claire wasn't a chemist. She wouldn't know how to cover her tracks completely. In our home office, I turned on Claire's laptop. She'd always used the same password for everything. Her mother's birthday followed by her mother's maiden name. Predictable. The computer unlocked on my first try. Her email was still open. I didn't have to search long. There were dozens of exchanges with someone named Brian Keller from Kellington Biotech, the same company Margaret had mentioned. The messages dated back 3 months. They started professionally enough, with Brian expressing interest in acquiring my lab's client list and proprietary soil analysis techniques. Claire had responded enthusiastically without my knowledge or consent. As I scrolled through the correspondence, my stomach knotted tighter. The tone changed about 6 weeks ago. Claire, Ethan's refusal is unfortunate, but not unexpected. Small business owners often have an emotional attachment that clouds their judgment. The offer we've made is more than generous for a business of that size. Claire's response, he's being stubborn. He doesn't see the bigger picture. Brian, perhaps there are other ways to convince him. The insurance policy you mentioned, that's a start. Sometimes people need to be guided to the right decision. The messages became more explicit over time. Brian suggested creating a situation of vulnerability where I would be financially and emotionally compelled to sell. Claire seemed hesitant at first, but was gradually persuaded by promises of a $40,000 consultant's fee upon successful acquisition of my business. The most recent email had arrived just yesterday. The revised offer expires Monday. If Ethan continues to resist, more persuasive measures may be necessary. Remember, this is for both your futures. Sometimes difficult decisions yield the best outcomes. The T method we discussed is untraceable if done correctly. Afterward, during his recovery period, you'll have power of attorney to handle business matters. The papers I sent you need only his signature. My hands shook as I read the words on the screen, my vision blurring with tears of rage. I had to brace myself against the desk, breathing deeply to maintain control. 7 years of marriage, countless shared dreams and promises, all of it a facade hiding this level of betrayal. I sat back, oddly calm after the wave of emotion passed. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that it felt almost unreal. Claire wasn't just having an affair with this Brian person. They were conspiring to incapacitate me, possibly kill me, and steal my business. My phone buzzed again. Ethan, please call me. Mom's condition is serious. Doctors are asking questions about what she consumed today. I texted back, on my way. Before leaving, I took photos of the emails, transferred them to my phone, and made sure to leave everything exactly as I'd found it. I also found the package of tea in the garbage, carefully wrapped in paper towels, and took a sample for additional testing. At the hospital, I found Claire in the waiting room, her face streaked with tears. She ran to me as I entered, throwing her arms around my neck. Ethan, thank God. Mom's getting worse. They're saying it might be some kind of poisoning. I hugged her back mechanically, feeling her body trembling against mine. How convincing her performance was. How utterly believable her distress. The warmth of her body against mine, once a source of comfort, now made my skin crawl. Poisoning, I repeated, my voice carefully modulated to show concern. How could that happen? They don't know. They're asking about everything she's eaten or drunk in the last 24 hours. Claire pulled back, searching my face. I told them about breakfast, the coffee, the tea. The special tea you made, I said quietly. Something flickered in Claire's eyes. Recognition, fear, calculation. Yes, she whispered. I don't understand how this could happen. A doctor approached us, Dr. Mendez according to her ID badge, a woman with kind eyes and a serious expression. Mrs. Cole, we've stabilized your mother for now, but her condition is critical. The symptoms suggest ingestion of a powerful laxative compound, possibly combined with another toxin. That's terrible, I said, putting my arm around Claire's shoulders. Could it be something in your tea, honey? The new blend you made this morning. Claire stiffened beside me. I don't. It was just a herbal blend. Where did you get it? Dr. Mendes asked. A health food store, Claire said quickly. Nothing unusual. We'd like to test it if possible, the doctor said. I think I threw it away, Claire responded too fast. It was a sample packet. I see, Dr. Mendes made a note on her tablet. Well, we're continuing to run tests. The next 24 hours will be critical. After the doctor left, Claire turned to me, her expression a mix of fear and suspicion. You think it was the tea? That's impossible. It was just herbs. I looked at her steadily. Was it, Claire? Was it really? The color drained from her face. What are you saying? I think you know exactly what I'm saying. Claire's expression hardened, a transformation so sudden it was almost shocking. The frightened, concerned daughter vanished, replaced by someone coldly calculating. You switched the cups, she said flatly. It wasn't a question. I did. Why would you do that unless you suspected something? How could you possibly have known? I shrugged. Chemistry background, remember? The one your mother is always saying I'm wasting. The tea smelled wrong, and you've never made me special tea in 7 years of marriage. Claire glanced around the waiting room, lowering her voice. You can't prove anything. Actually, I can. I tested the tea at my lab, and I found your emails with Brian Keller. She flinched as if I'd struck her. You went through my computer. You tried to poison me, Claire. Privacy invasion seems pretty minor in comparison. Her eyes darted around, seeking escape, solutions, excuses. It wasn't supposed to kill you, she finally whispered. Just make you sick enough to sign the papers. The business is worth more than you realize. Kellington's offer would destroy everything I've built, I finished for her. They'd absorb my client list, patent my techniques, and discard everything and everyone else. They would have kept you on as a consultant, she argued, desperation creeping into her voice. For how long? A year, 2, before replacing me with someone younger and cheaper. I shook my head. I built that business to last, Claire, to be something I could be proud of. Pride doesn't pay for the life I want, she hissed, abandoning all pretense. Your precious lab barely covers our mortgage. I'm tired of watching my friends take luxury vacations while I shop sales. Tired of explaining why my husband chooses dirt over ambition. The naked materialism in her voice stunned me, despite everything I'd already discovered. So you decided to poison me? I told you, it wasn't supposed to kill you. No, just violently ill enough to be hospitalized. Vulnerable enough to sign whatever you put in front of me. And what about the antifreeze, Claire? Was that Brian's suggestion too? Her eyes widened. What are you talking about? The ethylene glycol in the tea. Did you even know what you were putting in it? Or did you just follow Brian's recipe blindly? Claire's face crumpled. He said it was untraceable, that it would just look like severe gastroenteritis. Well, he was wrong, and now your mother is fighting for her life because of it. The weight of what she'd done seemed to finally hit Claire. She sank into a nearby chair, her body folding in on itself. Oh God, Mom. I felt nothing watching her breakdown. No satisfaction, no anger, just a profound emptiness where love had once lived. I've already called a lawyer, I said calmly. Divorce papers will be ready tomorrow. I've also secured all our financial accounts and changed the locks on the lab. Claire looked up, her mascara streaked down her cheeks. You can't. I've sent copies of your emails with Brian to my attorney, along with the lab results from the tea. If anything happens to me, anything at all, they go straight to the police. You wouldn't, she whispered. It would destroy me. Like you tried to destroy me, I countered, my voice rising slightly before I caught myself. Consider yourself lucky I haven't gone to the police already. The only reason I haven't is because I still need to figure out how involved your mother was in this scheme. A nurse appeared at that moment. Mrs. Cole, your mother is asking for you. Claire stood on shaky legs, staring at me with a mixture of hatred and fear. This isn't over. Actually, it is, I said. Completely over. I watched her follow the nurse through the double doors, then sat down, suddenly exhausted. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Cole, this is Brian Keller. We should talk about your business proposition. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., Riverside Coffee. I smiled grimly and texted back, "Looking forward to it. I'll bring the tea." The next morning, I arrived at Riverside Coffee 20 minutes early, setting up my laptop at a corner table with clear sight lines to the entrance. I'd barely slept, spending most of the night documenting everything I'd discovered and preparing for this meeting. Brian Keller was exactly what I expected. Mid-40s, expensive suit, the polished confidence of someone used to getting his way. He spotted me immediately, his professional smile faltering slightly when he noticed my expression. "Mr. Cole," he said, extending his hand, "a pleasure to finally meet you." I didn't stand or take his hand. "Sit down, Brian." He hesitated, then took the seat across from me, maintaining his corporate composure. "I understand you've had some reservations about our offer. I'm hoping we can address those concerns today. Let's start with my concern about you conspiring with my wife to poison me," I said, keeping my voice conversational despite the words. Brian's smile froze. "I'm not sure what you're—" I turned my laptop around, displaying one of his emails to Claire. "Should I read it aloud? The part where you suggest using tea as an untraceable delivery method, or maybe the section detailing how Claire should use my incapacitation to gain power of attorney." The blood drained from his face. "These emails are private correspondence. You have no right—" "Actually, they were on a computer I paid for, in a house I own half of. But that's really beside the point when we're discussing attempted murder, isn't it?" "Nobody was trying to murder anyone," he hissed, leaning forward. "This is a ridiculous mischaracterization." "I have the lab results from the tea, Brian." I slid a folder toward him. "Senna extract at 5 times the therapeutic dose, combined with ethylene glycol. Were you aware that combination could be lethal?" He didn't touch the folder. "Whatever Claire may have done was her own initiative. Kellington Biotech had nothing to do with—" "Save it," I cut him off. "I have the entire email chain. 43 messages detailing exactly how involved you and Kellington were, including the $40,000 consultant's fee you promised my wife." Brian's professional demeanor cracked. "What do you want, Cole?" "Money. I want you and your company to disappear from my life, permanently. No more offers, no more contact with me, or anyone associated with my business." He scoffed. "Or what? You'll go to the police. They'll never believe—" "The police are option 1, I agreed. "Though I'm also considering your board of directors, your competitors, and the Denver Business Journal. I wonder how Kellington's stock would perform after a scandal involving corporate espionage and attempted poisoning." That hit home. Brian's face contorted with barely controlled rage. "You're making a serious mistake, Cole." "No, you made the serious mistake when you decided my business was worth having someone poisoned." I closed my laptop and stood up. "One more thing. Claire's mother is currently in intensive care because she drank the tea meant for me. If she dies, I promise you'll be facing charges alongside my wife." I left him sitting there, white-faced and silent. As I walked out of the coffee shop, I felt no triumph, just a hollow relief that this part was over. My phone rang just as I reached my car. It was the hospital. "Mr. Cole, this is Dr. Mendez. I think you should come in right away. It's about your mother-in-law." "What's happened?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "I'm afraid her condition has deteriorated rapidly. We're doing everything we can, but you should prepare your wife for the possibility that her mother might not make it through the day." I thanked the doctor and hung up, leaning against my car for support. I hadn't wished death on Margaret. Despite her constant criticism, she was just a mother trying to secure what she thought was best for her daughter. She didn't deserve to die for Claire's ambition. When I arrived at the hospital, I found Claire sitting alone in the ICU waiting room, her face ravaged by tears and lack of sleep. She looked up when I approached, her expression a mixture of grief and hatred. "They say she's dying," she said flatly. "Kidney failure. They can't reverse it." I sat beside her, keeping a careful distance. "I'm sorry, Claire." "Are you?" she asked bitterly. "This is what you wanted, isn't it? To punish me." "I never wanted anyone to die," I said quietly. "Least of all your mother." Claire laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "But you were fine with me going to prison." "You're going to the police, aren't you? That's why you met with Brian." I stared at her, seeing not the woman I'd married, but a stranger. "How do you know I met with Brian?" She looked away. "He called me after. Said you had evidence, that I should run." Her hands twisted in her lap. But I couldn't leave Mom. And yet you were willing to poison me, I said softly. Your husband, the person you promised to love and honor. You don't understand, she whispered. You never understood what it's like to want more. To see everyone around you succeeding while you're stuck in the same place year after year. We weren't stuck, Claire. We were building something. Together. Or at least I thought we were. A doctor appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Cole, your mother is asking for you both. Claire looked at me surprised. Both of us. The doctor nodded. She was very specific. We followed her into the ICU where Margaret lay connected to a tangle of machines and tubes. Her face was gray, her breathing labored. When she saw us enter, she motioned weakly for us to come closer. Claire, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the beeping monitors. What did you do? Claire grabbed her mother's hand. Mom, please, save your strength. The tea, Margaret interrupted. It wasn't meant for me, was it? Claire froze. I don't know what you're talking about. Margaret's eyes, cloudy with pain and medication, shifted to me. Ethan, you knew. I nodded. I'm sorry, Margaret. She closed her eyes briefly. That's why you switched the cups. You knew. Claire stared at her mother in horror. Mom, you're confused. The medication. Stop lying, Margaret hissed with sudden strength. I heard you. This morning. On the phone with that man talking about the tea, about Ethan signing papers during his recovery. She turned to me. I was going to warn you at breakfast. But then, her voice trailed off as she was seized by a coughing fit. Claire stood rigid, caught in her lies from an unexpected direction. Mom, I never meant for anyone to get hurt. It was just supposed to make him sick enough to… To what? Margaret demanded, her voice strengthening with anger. To manipulate him, to steal his business. I raised you better than this. You raised me to succeed, Claire shot back, to aim higher. You're the one who always said his lab was holding me back, that I deserve better. I never said to poison him. Margaret's monitor began beeping more rapidly as her heart rate increased. My God, Claire, what have you become? A nurse hurried in, checking the monitors. Mrs. Sawyer, you need to stay calm. Margaret ignored her, keeping her gaze locked on her daughter. I'm disappointed in you, Claire. So disappointed. She turned to me. Ethan, I'm sorry I underestimated you, and I'm sorry for what my daughter tried to do. The nurse ushered us out, saying Margaret needed to rest. In the hallway, Claire turned on me, her face contorted with rage and grief. Are you happy now? She's going to die hating me. This is your fault. My fault. I stared at her in disbelief. You mixed the poison, Claire. You poured it into a cup meant for me. How is any of this my fault? If you had just taken the damn deal in the first place. If I had just let your boyfriend steal my business, you mean? Claire recoiled. Brian isn't my boyfriend. No, just your co-conspirator then. She opened her mouth to respond, but was interrupted by a code alarm blaring from Margaret's room. Medical staff rushed past us. We stood frozen in the hallway as doctors and nurses worked frantically to save Margaret's life. 10 minutes later, a doctor emerged, his face solemn. Mrs. Cole, I'm very sorry. We did everything we could, but your mother's heart couldn't withstand the strain. She's gone. Claire collapsed against the wall, a keening wail escaping her lips. I stood awkwardly nearby, unsure what to do in this bizarre situation, comforting the wife who had tried to kill me over the death of her mother, who she had accidentally poisoned instead. Before I could decide, 2 police officers approached us. Mrs. Claire Cole, one of them asked. Claire looked up, her face tear-stained and confused. Yes, we need you to come with us. We have some questions about your mother's condition. What? Now? My mother just died. The officer's expression was sympathetic but firm. We've received information about potentially suspicious circumstances surrounding her illness. It's standard procedure in cases like this. Claire's panicked eyes found mine. Ethan! I shook my head slightly. I didn't call them. Then who? One of the nurses stepped forward. The toxicology report showed ethylene glycol in Mrs. Sawyer's system. Hospital policy requires us to report suspected poisonings to the police. Claire's face drained of color. This is a mistake. I need to call a lawyer. You can do that at the station, the officer said, taking her gently but firmly by the arm. Please come with us, Mrs. Cole. As they led Claire away, she looked back at me, her expression a mixture of rage and pleading. Ethan, don't let them do this. Tell them it was an accident. Tell them. I stood silently, watching as they escorted my wife through the hospital corridor. I felt oddly detached, as if watching a movie about someone else's life falling apart. A young doctor approached me, clipboard in hand. Mr. Cole, there are some forms you need to sign regarding Mrs. Sawyer. I nodded mechanically and followed him to a small office. As I sat filling out paperwork for my mother-in-law's body, my phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer. Police called me. They have Claire. Evidence from hospital is damning. Need to meet ASAP. 3 days later, I stood in our bedroom, my bedroom now, packing Claire's clothes into boxes. She had been formally charged with negligent homicide in her mother's death and attempted murder in my case. Brian Keller had also been arrested as an accessory. Bail had been denied for both of them. I picked up a framed photo from Claire's nightstand, us on our honeymoon in Hawaii, smiling, sunburned, and blissfully happy. Had she loved me then? Had any of it been real? I would probably never know. The doorbell rang, breaking me from my thoughts. I went downstairs to find Detective Morris on my porch, her expression grim. Mr. Cole, we need to talk. I invited her in, leading her to the kitchen. The same kitchen where this nightmare had begun only a few days ago. Claire's claiming the poisoning was your idea, Detective Morris said without preamble. She says you set her up, that you were the one who wanted to get rid of Margaret and framed her for it. I stared at her, momentarily speechless. That's absurd. I know. The evidence doesn't support her story at all, but she's desperate. The detective placed a folder on the table. We found this in a storage unit rented in Claire's name. Opened 3 months ago. Inside were printed emails between Claire and Brian, going back even further than what I'd found. Detailed instructions for creating the poison tea, and copies of my life insurance policy with notes in Claire's handwriting about payout amounts and waiting periods. There's also this, Detective Morris said, pulling out a small notebook. Seems to be a journal of sorts. Claire was keeping track of your schedule, your habits, looking for the perfect opportunity. I flipped through the notebook, my stomach churning at the clinical way Claire had documented my life, like a scientist observing a lab specimen. The last entry was from the day before the poisoning. E working late tomorrow. Perfect chance with M visiting. Will use special tea. B says effects take 2 to 3 hours. Should be enough time to get papers ready. Detective Morris watched me carefully. The district attorney is considering upgrading the charges to premeditated murder for your mother-in-law's death and attempted premeditated murder in your case. With this evidence, Claire is looking at life without parole. I closed the notebook, suddenly exhausted. And Brian, Kellington's lawyers are already distancing the company from him, claiming he acted alone. But we found communications suggesting upper management knew about the plan to acquire your business through coercive means. She paused. They'll likely offer him a deal to testify against Claire. And she'll say it was all his idea, I guessed. That's usually how it goes. Detective Morris gathered the evidence back into her folder. We'll need your formal statement tomorrow at the station. 9 a.m. Work for you. I nodded, walking her to the door. As she was leaving, she turned back. Mr. Cole, for what it's worth, I'm sorry about your wife. Cases like this, they make you wonder if you ever really know someone. After she left, I returned to the kitchen and poured myself a scotch, staring at the chair where Margaret had sat only days ago. The chair where I'd switched the cups that changed everything. My phone rang. Claire's lawyer. Mr. Cole, my client would like to speak with you. I have nothing to say to Claire, I replied flatly. She's prepared to make a full confession, but she wants to talk to you first. Just once. Tinonum. I hesitated, then agreed to visit her the next day after giving my statement. The county jail was cold and impersonal, smelling of disinfectant and despair. Claire sat across from me in the visiting area, orange jumpsuit hanging loose on her frame, dark circles under her eyes. Thank you for coming, she said quietly. Your lawyer said you wanted to confess. She nodded. I do, but I needed to see you first, to tell you why. I know why, Claire. The money, the lifestyle you thought you deserved. It wasn't just that. She leaned forward. I was pregnant once. Did you know that? I stared at her, shocked. What? When? 3 years ago. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd want to keep it, and I didn't. She twisted her hands together. I couldn't imagine raising a child in our life as it was. The uncertain income, the long hours you spent at the lab, the modest house in an average school district. So you had an abortion without telling me, I said, a new pain blooming alongside all the others. She nodded. After that, I started seeing everything differently. Started resenting the limitations of our life, your dedication to a business that would never make us wealthy. She met my eyes. I never stopped loving you, Ethan. I just stopped believing in your dream. So you decided to poison me, I said flatly. Some definition of love. It wasn't supposed to kill you, she insisted. Brian said it would just make you sick enough to be hospitalized, weak enough to be persuaded, and my signature on those papers while I was weak. Would that have been legal, Claire? She looked away. It doesn't matter now. Mom's gone because of me, and I'm going to prison for a very long time. Yes, you are. Her eyes filled with tears. I don't expect forgiveness, Ethan, but I wanted you to know that in my twisted way, I thought I was doing what was best for us, for our future. I stood up. There is no us anymore, Claire. There's no future for us. You destroyed that the moment you decided your desires were more important than my life. She nodded, wiping away tears. I know, I needed to say it before I confess everything. Goodbye, Claire. As I walked out of the jail, I felt a strange sense of closure. The woman I had married was truly gone. Perhaps she had never really existed. In her place was a stranger who had been willing to poison me for money and status. A week later, Claire formally confessed to all charges, implicated Brian Keller, and provided evidence against executives at Kellington Biotech who had known about the plan. The scandal rocked the corporate world, with Kellington's stock plummeting amid investigations and lawsuits. The district attorney, seeking to make an example of corporate conspiracy, pursued the maximum charges. Claire was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole for first-degree murder and attempted murder. Brian Keller received 20 years. 3 Kellington executives faced charges ranging from conspiracy to corporate espionage. I watched the sentencing from the back of the courtroom, feeling nothing but emptiness as Claire was led away in handcuffs, her face pale and resigned. Outside the courthouse, a light snow had begun to fall, blanketing Denver in pristine white that seemed to mock the darkness of what had transpired. I drove to my laboratory where work continued despite everything that had happened. New samples awaited analysis. Clients still needed results. Life, somehow, went on. 6 months later, my business was thriving, partly due to the publicity from the case and partly from a renewed dedication to my work. The house had been sold, too full of memories to remain habitable. I lived in a downtown apartment now, surrounded by different views, different sounds. Occasionally, I received letters from Claire in prison. I never opened them. Whatever explanations or apologies or accusations they contained wouldn't change what had happened or bring back the life I thought we had. Instead, I focused on rebuilding. Not just my business, but myself. The man who had nearly been poisoned by his wife's ambition was not the same man who now ran a growing environmental analysis company. He was more cautious, perhaps, but also more determined. More aware of the darkness people could harbor behind loving facades, but also more appreciative of genuine connections when they appeared. 1 year after that fateful Sunday morning, I sat alone in my office, reviewing reports from a new soil analysis technique we had developed. My phone rang, Claire's prison number. For the first time, I answered. Ethan, her voice sounded thin, distant. I didn't think you'd pick up. What do you want, Claire? A pause. I'm dying. Cancer. It's advanced. I closed my eyes, unsure how to respond. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm not calling for sympathy, she said quickly. I wanted to hear your voice one last time, and to tell you that you were right to build your business the way you did. It was something real, something meaningful. I was too blind to see it. It's a bit late for that realization, I said, more gently than I'd intended. I know. Far too late. She coughed, a hollow, rattling sound. Goodbye, Ethan. Live well. The line went dead. I sat staring at the phone for a long time, a complex mixture of emotions washing through me. Anger, pity, grief for what might have been. 2 weeks later, I received official notification of Claire's death. Cancer of the liver, accelerated by the guilt and stress of her circumstances. Her body was cremated, with no service as she had requested. That evening, I stood on my apartment balcony, watching the sun set behind the mountains. In my hand was the last letter Claire had sent me, finally opened. It contained only 3 lines. The bitterness wasn't in the tea. It was in me all along. I'm sorry I tried to make you drink it too. Wekum, I folded the note and put it away, then turned back to the view, to the city sprawling below, to the future stretching ahead, uncertain but mine, wholly mine to shape as I chose. The bitter brew that had been meant to end one chapter of my life had instead started another. Not the chapter Claire had planned with Brian Keller, but something entirely of my own making. Something built on the foundation of everything I'd fought to protect. And for the first time since that Sunday morning when I'd switched teacups with my mother-in-law, I felt something like peace.